I feel anybody who has grown up with video games at some point in their childhood looked at a game on the shelf of their local big box store and recognized a character from a show they liked and said, "Oh mommy, oh daddy, can you please buy this game for me? I love this character ever so." And if in the right mood, their parent would, often begrudgingly, buy the game for them, and they'd go home and have a blast with the game, or have their soul crushed by how bad it was. I was the kid who didn't really learn this valuable lesson at all when I was a kid, and constantly fell into the trap of buying games that had my favorite characters on them. I can go back to my hometown and look at my PS2 game library and guarantee you that half of those games are based on a pre-existing IP. However, there is one IP that stands above the rest in terms of quality, and that license is good old Spongebob Squarepants. He has had his downfalls in games, trust me, but from the games that people actually remember, he has a pretty good track record. The most notable one being Battle for Bikini Bottom, a 3D collectathon platformer that, at least in my humble opinion, is one of the greatest 3D collectathons to bless this great green and blue rock we call home. Game's even getting a remake that's already looking to be amazing. However, there exists another game that most people hold in pretty close regard quality-wise, and that's a sentiment I can't really get behind after coming back to it with a more critical eye after all these years. So join me as I take a more retrospective look on this game that I've sunk countless hours into. I'm Alkaline. Welcome to my rec room. The Spongebob Squarepants movie game, as is implied by the title, is a tie-in video game that is based on the SpongeBob movie that released in 2004, not to be confused with the SpongeBob movie game that came out in 2015 and, hits video game tie-in.
Barney's about to meet his maker.
Die, you commie fucker!
Don't throw my...
It largely follows the same formula as its predecessor, Battle for Bikini Bottom, though if you play through both of the games I've previously mentioned, even for a little bit, you'll notice that both games have wildly different level designs. Battle for Bikini Bottom handles its levels with a much more open world sense, structuring its levels with these spacious designs that have the player following a main quest per se. A good example being Squidward needing King Jellyfish Jelly to heal his sting wounds, while also allowing them to explore the levels to get extra golden spatulas, or collectibles to get more golden spatulas. Every level is designed a bit like a neuron, even though the levels have a definitive beginning and end point, which loops the player back to the beginning once they reach the end. Every level has diverging paths that the player can find if they explore the area completely or keep an eye out for. The best example of this is in the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard. Once the player gets to the end of the game and have the cruise bubble ability, by exploring the first area of the graveyard, they'll come to a small cliff just above the goo, and by pressing a button, they'll find a cage that opens up, revealing a golden spatula. Unfortunately, it's under a lot of goo that, if the player touches, they'll be put back to where they were, or drown. So the player's goal is to find out how to get rid of this goo. By looking at the skyline of the level, the player will notice a massive ship jetting out of the goo below. By heading in front of said ship, the player will notice a hatch with goo flowing out of it. If the player shoots the hatch with a cruise bubble, the goo will stop flowing, making the goo surrounding the area to lower, and for the player to go back to the cliff and collect that golden spatula. Ideas like this keep the sense of exploration fresh by designing levels that are more open and have small diverging paths to offer a break from the main quest without feeling obvious or constricting. It's this sense of shrouding linearity and more open level design that the SpongeBob movie game sorely lacks. If Battle for Bikini Bottom is designed like a neuron, this game is designed like a tree branch, pretty much a straight line with small branching paths that lead to a Goofy Goober token. This game's equivalent to golden spatulas, and nothing else. Nearly every level where you play on foot, we'll get to why I say on foot in a bit, is a straight shot to the finish with very little sidetracks to gather Goofy Goober tokens. Those goo ship moments are completely gone, and the game locks the player to a path, allowing for very little exploration, and when there is exploration, it often only leads to a mini-game that is repeated countless times throughout the course of the game for a golden spatula. The game isn't subtle about where Goofy Goober tokens are either. There's always some sort of button, some sort of glowing pad to go to a sponge ball section, a floating cube section, a combat trial, or some time where the game is basically shouting at you, "Hey buddy, you should go check that out." Strangely enough, the area of the game where this isn't an issue is the bonus treasure chests that you collect through the game, where they're cleverly hidden and reward exploration and give the player access to different costumes and concept art. I don't get why this couldn't have been extended to the Goofy Goober tokens. I get that it's a kid's game and kids aren't exactly Ivy League students, but Battle for Bikini Bottom was as well and didn't have this problem, and when it did with obvious button placements, it felt natural because of its story of robot invasion. So why is it so out of place in this game? It's because of how its levels are designed. There's nothing wrong with this type of level design either. Series like Donkey Kong Country are considered legendary and are built around this design, but if you're going to design your levels to be this linear, you can't keep a collectathon format. It grinds the game progression to a halt and makes the player backtrack if they haven't met the Goofy Goober token amount needed in the upcoming levels to unlock a new move required to beat the game from that point forward. In Battle for Bikini Bottom, new moves are unlocked after beating a major boss and getting access to a new area. Even though you are technically required to have a certain number of spatulas like the Spongebob movie game, the game doesn't stop you out of nowhere and say, you can't go here yet. Instead, it simply shows the number required to gain access to a new level or to go to a boss. This makes it so players are encouraged to explore all of the levels before moving on to the next one. But like I said previously, with linear level design, that thought isn't going to occur to most players, since once they reach the end of a level, they move on to the next one. To continue with that linear level design, you know earlier how I said on foot? Yeah, there are only 7 levels where you actually get to explore a level. The rest are either boss fights or the absolute worst part about this game, the slide and paddy wagon sections. This is the part of the game that locks you to a path harder than anything else and throws exploration out of the window. It'll try and fool you like, what do you mean there are no diverging paths? You can go through this destroyed building or you can go around it. That's good enough, right? Going through these levels once is fine because the visuals for them are actually pretty good due to the stellar art direction of this game. But remember this game's nasty habit of randomly stopping you from progressing through the game because you don't have enough Goofy Goober tokens in order to unlock new abilities? Yeah, some Goofy Goober tokens require abilities that you don't get till super late in the game, like the second level having 2 tokens that aren't able to be collected without the last abilities you get for Spongebob and Patrick. Battle for Bikini Bottom also does this, mind you, but it's very infrequent when the reward is a spatula or you get a collectible. So considering you can't finish a significant amount of the levels you actually explore on foot without those late game abilities on the first go, how are you going to get past those barriers? With time trials and ring challenges. So after you initially beat a slide or paddy wagon section, you are given the option to go back and beat time trials and ring challenges. You gotta beat the times given or you gotta go through the rings all quick leg, with the difficulty increasing after each one you do. Pretty simple. Due to the aforementioned progression design of having to backtrack and collect more Goofy Goober tokens and some of the on-foot tokens requiring late game abilities, players are forced to fall back on the paddy wagon trials and ring challenges in order to progress through the game. This wouldn't be as bad as it is if paddy wagon and slide levels didn't make up half of the entire game. So once you hit a certain point in the game where you are missing a metric butt ton of Goofy Goober tokens, you best bet your bottom dollar you're hauling your ass back to the paddy wagon and slide levels to slave away at getting those Goofy Goober tokens. A very good sign that a game is grind heavy and boring to play through for the vast majority of it is when the speedrunning community decides to create a separate category dedicated to cutting out half of the game and only running the levels where you play on foot, which I believe is now one of the main categories that people speedrun. This game is designed like garbage. And it's a shame because this game has some amazing qualities going for it. The art direction is spot on and transfers the feel of the movie into the game, and the levels evoke that sense of grand adventure you get from watching the movie. Hell, one of the levels, Shell City Dead Ahead, isn't even based on anything in the movie, but it feels like it could have been. The music pairs excellently with that art direction, and no track feels out of place and pairs well with the environment or situation at hand. One of my favorite music tracks of all time comes from this game, and plays when you fight Dennis for the first time. Never in my life have I had a music track convey to me how serious a boss fight is. I don't know about you, but to me this track exudes the, if you don't win, the characters you love so much are gonna die, and it's all your fault kind of vibe. The combat improves upon Battle for Bikini Bottom by adding an upgrade system in which you use the currency of manliness points to beef up your moves, which make combat a lot more fun and interesting. The boss fights are fun and engaging by adding common enemies into the boss fight, keeping the player constantly on their toes, which is a marked improvement on Battle for Bikini Bottom's bosses that were much more slow and predictable, with their attack patterns proving more a stepping stone than a legitimate threat, and the platforming is as crisp as it was in Battle for Bikini Bottom. There are signs that love and care went into this game. It just doesn't make sense that the previous game is so much better when there are obvious marks of improvement in its spiritual sequel. It feels like this game was going in the right direction but just wasn't allowed enough time in the oven. Flashback to the early 2000s. Los Angeles-based developer Heavy Iron Studios had been acquired by previous publisher THQ, now known as THQ Nordic, to create games based on cartoons and children's IPs. Included among these IPs are the likes of Scooby-Doo and the up-and-coming phenomenon Spongebob Squarepants. After the success of Battle for Bikini Bottom, which had a remarkable development time of 1 year according to the current speedrun world record holder Shift, the studio proved to their publisher they could create successful games and quick to boot. With this trust, Heavy Iron Studios would be given 2 big projects to begin development on. These projects were 2 movie tie-in video games, one for the upcoming Spongebob Squarepants movie to be released in 2004, and The Incredibles to be released the same year. Though the studio accepted the challenge of developing 2 games at once despite its small size, it came at a cost, and this is entirely evident in the design of the SpongeBob movie game. Considering the studio had even less time to develop the SpongeBob movie game than Battle for Bikini Bottom, and on top of that had to have half of their already small team dedicated to a completely separate project, they had to work with what they had and design a game that was easy to put together based on already existing assets, models, existing moves from Battle for Bikini Bottom, and create levels that were much more linear and have a progression system that forced backtracking in order to pad out game length, so children wouldn't feel robbed when the game was 5 hours long without all the paddy wagon and slide levels. I can imagine a reality where this game was a true successor to Battle for Bikini Bottom, but unfortunately back then the licensed video game industry couldn't have cared less about the quality of a game as long as rights holders got their cut of the money. Heavy Iron Studios did their best with the resources and time that they had, and I commend them for even being able to put a game that was as polished as that out on the market and can be so fondly remembered by a lot of people. And this game is definitely of higher quality than a lot of other games this generation, despite the harsh words I've given it. However, we can't stay kids forever, and it's important to go back with a more critical eye to see if these games hold up as much as we remember, even if it's a movie tie-in game, and unfortunately the SpongeBob movie game just doesn't make the cut. Funnily enough, there actually exists a game in the same IP that takes the same level design of the SpongeBob movie game and does it way better, but doesn't get nearly as much praise. Creature from the Krusty Krab has the same linear level design, but completely eliminates the issue of backtracking by changing the collectathon aspect into a style that makes more sense with linear level design by making the player collect a specific set of items in order to progress the story of that level. After completion of that level, the player is thrust into a new scenario where none of the previous level's goals hold impact on the player's current progress outside of story, essentially meaning a fresh start and continue new content for the player to enjoy through to the end of the game. I never hear people talk about this game as much as it deserves because it does a way better when it comes to progression, level design, and I'll dare say artistic direction than the SpongeBob movie game ever did. So whenever I engage myself in those discussions where the topic of best SpongeBob game comes up, and I hear someone say that the SpongeBob movie game is the best out of them all, it always strikes me as odd when the game has aged so poorly and is so boring to play through compared to its predecessor. Not to say that people can't choose what they like to play, but most of the time it's based on memories of times long gone and haven't played the game in over a decade. It's unfortunate really because I remember pouring countless hours into this game when I was younger and even in my teenage years. Yes, I had no friends and would stay in my home for the better part of the day playing these games. Get off my back, why don't ya? It's just a little heartbreaking to see something I used to hold so dearly fall from grace so hard. But I guess that's another negative to growing up. I'm Alkaline. Thanks for coming to my rec room. Hey guys, it's Alkaline. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down and tell me why in the comments or whatever. If you have any criticisms, feel free to tell me. A bit of an explanation on where I've been. A, major depressive swing. B, schoolwork being really intense last semester. C, Sony Vegas literally hating me. And D, internet access in my room is very inconsistent this semester, even with Ethernet, so it makes it hard for me to gather media I need so my video isn't black screen the entire time. I'll be uploading more videos. The rate at which I upload them is going to be dependent on how much work I have for school, but yeah, originally this video was supposed to be about the history of licensed video games, so this was a compromise because the video just wasn't turning out how I wanted it to. So yeah, if you like my content, feel free to subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter at the link down in the description. I can get political in sad boy hours, but I find myself a pretty funny guy. Alright, thanks for watching my video again. Bye-bye.